Chapter 206. Triumph. The spiders were about the size of a human, incredibly fast, and had plates of something that resembled iron covering parts of their repulsive bodies. They looked like armored battle machines created for the sole purpose of slaughtering living things. They also looked strangely familiar. With a little effort, Sunny realized that these abominations looked a lot like lesser, much smaller versions of the giant fallen beasts that had destroyed the original Stone Saint and her kin. It's just that their size and armor weren't nearly as formidable. If so, I have bad news for you fools. As soon as the spiders attacked, the members of the cohort reacted with the deadly calmness of experienced Dark City hunters. Weapons flashed in the air, severing limbs and piercing through iron as though it was paper. Effie straight up flattened one of the creatures with a devastating strike of her battered shield. The poor beast didn't even have time to understand what a huge mistake it had made. The others were no less efficient. Sunny himself threw the prowling thorn and pulled on the invisible string as soon as it sunk into the flesh of one of the spiders, bringing its jump to an abrupt end and sending it crashing to the ground. Before the beast could stand up, Quiet Dancer streaked through the air and pierced its head clean through. Just a few short seconds after the spiders had tried to ambush the group of humans, the battle was over. 3 dead nightmare creatures were sprawled in the mud, while the 4th one ended up pinned to a coral wall with several arrows. They could have even shaved a second or two if it weren't for the need to look out for the spiderwebs. Sunny shook his head. Disappointing. Wait, why was he disappointed? Great, this was great. Not every victory had to almost cost him his life. If there was one thing to feel disappointed about, it was that this one was so swift that he had not even gotten the chance to finish any of the enemies himself, thus not receiving any rewards from the spell. But even then, he would be glad to only fight easy battles like this in the future. Nephi's cleaned the blade of her sword with a piece of cloth, listened to the silence for a few moments to make sure that nothing else was going to attack them, and then gave the cohort a go-ahead to start dressing the monsters down. Soon, soul shards, strips of meat, and other useful parts were cut, cleaned, and put into Effie's enchanted bag. Everything was done with efficient speed and professionalism that could only come from a lot of experience. Sunny could only shake his head again. They were able to dispose of the iron spiders with such ease because of 2 reasons. First, as far as nightmare creatures went, these ones were not on the same level as, for example, carapace scavengers. They had a slight advantage in speed, but were not nearly as strong, agile, and ridiculously tough. If Sunny could guess, he would say that the iron spiders relied heavily on their webs and battlefield advantage to defeat the prey. Because the cohort had destroyed the webs in advance, their main advantage was gone. The second reason was the cohort itself. They were some of the deadliest humans on the Forgotten Shore. Sunny was sure that at least 4 of them could kill a pathfinder of the host in single combat, if not one of the lieutenants themselves. They were the best and the brightest the outer settlement could offer, after all. Effie had been right when she said that there had never been such a powerful cohort outside the walls of the Bright Castle before. All in all, the 6 of them were more than equipped to handle just 3 awakened beasts. The labyrinth was going to really try harder if it wished to see them dead. Sunny chuckled. Just 3 awakened beasts, yeah, how crazy did this sound? And yet it was true. Finishing up with the dead spiders, the cohort indifferently left their eviscerated bodies behind and continued on their way. After several more minor skirmishes with the iron spiders, they had finally reached their destination. Not too far away from them, colored pink by the evening sun, a magnificent arch of white marble rose high above the sea of crimson coral. The giant structure was clearly created by the same people who had built the Bright Castle and made from the same stone. It looked like a much larger sibling of the pristine arch that guarded the entrance to the White Road, which climbed all the way to the outer settlement. Only this one was much more weathered, bleak, and damaged. Signs of corrosion and deep cracks covered its surface, with one of its sides being partially collapsed. Sunny studied the arch and looked at Nephi's. "This is our stop for the night." She gave him a simple nod and said after a short pause, "We need to pick up our pace. The night is close, and we might have to fight to clear the top of it." Sunny sighed. Fighting again, when would they finally be able to rest? It had been such a long day. However, he kept his mouth shut. Changing Star was the most tired out of all of them, due to healing all their wounds, no less, and he didn't see her complaining. So it wasn't his place. To his left, Effie suddenly cursed and groaned. "More fighting? Come on. When are we finally going to eat?" Sunny blinked. "Well, that works too, I guess." Staring at the huntress, Nephi shook her head and silently walked forward. Soon they reached the giant arch. Kai summoned his bow and flew up, only to return a few minutes later and report that no terrible monster was nesting on top of the ancient structure. With sighs of relief, the members of the cohort climbed the golden rope one after another, and were soon standing far above the labyrinth, silently watching as the flood of black water drowned it in the lightless depths. As the sun disappeared beyond the horizon, they were left on a rectangular island made out of white marble. All around it, there was nothing but the undulating waves of the dark sea. Sunny was once again surrounded from all sides by nothing but darkness and black water. He did not like the feeling. The night passed with no incidents. In the morning, Sunny was woken up by the sound of the surging waves and opened his eyes to see the sun slowly rising from beyond the horizon. Rubbing his face, he sat up and looked around, noticing that most of the cohort was still asleep. Only Kai, who had been the last one to stand watch, was awake, sitting on the edge of the arch and admiring the dawn with a dreamy look on his face. Sunny wanted to call out to him and warn the charming archer not to sit this close to the edge, but then remembered that Kai could fly. Yeah, like I would forget it again. Using the opportunity, he dove into the soul sea and summoned Stone Saint from the depths of the shadow core, where she was sleeping in the embrace of nurturing black flames. Just like before, the shadow did not appear from a sphere of light like an echo would, but stepped out from a whirlpool of dark fire. Then she stood motionlessly in front of Sunny like an actual statue, seemingly indifferent both to his presence and the wounds covering her body. Sunny walked around the Stone Saint, studying the extent of damage done to her by the undead horde. The armor of the taciturn knight was battered and broken, pierced in several places by the claws of the countless skeletons she had fought. The ruby dust wasn't flowing from the breaches anymore, but he could see deep gashes on her smooth, gray skin. Bastards! Who dares to hurt his shadow? Shaking his head, Sunny dismissed the saint, sending her back into the restorative darkness of the shadow core. The damage, while extensive, was not really threatening to her existence. In a couple of days, his pet monster should fully recover. In fact, she already looked better than she had yesterday. Leaving the Soul Sea, Sunny inhaled the fresh air, lingered for a few moments, and then turned to Kai. "Hey, Knight, are you stupid? Don't sit this close to the edge." The charming archer looked at him and raised an eyebrow. "I can fly, remember, if I fall." Sunny scoffed. "I'm not worried about you falling into the cursed sea. I am worried about something dragging you off into it. That'd be terrible, right?" Quite happy with himself, he grinned and turned away. What a nice way to start the day. Because everyone needed some time to rest and recuperate, they decided to spend a day on the Marble Arch and continue their journey tomorrow. As the result, Sunny was currently staring at the sight that wasn't really funny, but filled him with mirth nevertheless. Back in the real world, when he had time to consume some entertainment, Sunny had noticed a certain popular trope. In most dramas, webtoons, and cartoons aimed at young boys and teenagers, The heroes would inevitably end up spending a day at the beach during their adventures. He didn't quite know why such a trope existed, but suspected that it was just an excuse to show the female characters in nothing but revealing swimsuits. Not that he had anything against it. In any case, Sonny had never imagined that he was going to end up in such an episode himself one day. This is simply hilarious. Barely holding himself from laughing out loud, Sonny glanced at his companions. Because everyone's armor and weapons were damaged during the battle in the catacombs, they had to keep these memories inside the Soul Sea for a bit of time to allow them to restore themselves, just like Stone Saint was currently doing in the depths of his shadow core. As the result, all of them, including Sonny himself, were currently wearing nothing except for some loincloths and, in the case of the girls, makeshift brassieres. Provided these crude undergarments weren't really swimsuits, and the Marble Arch could barely be considered a beach even at night, but still, the situation was funnily similar. They were all half-naked and relaxing in the middle of a something that someone could call an adventure, so it was close enough. He was in a rather good mood. Everyone was busy doing their thing. There was a fire in the middle of the arch, with roasting meat filling the air with an appetizing aroma. Effie was tending to it. The tan and lean body of the muscular huntress looked like it was cut from stone, as if she was a sculpture of an ancient goddess come to life. Sonny tried to count her abs and got distracted halfway through by not-so-stone-like parts of her robust figure. After a couple of seconds of thoughtless bliss, Sonny had to hurriedly look away. The last thing he wanted was pure thoughts. Nephi's was helping Effie with the breakfast. Next to the vigorous huntress, her figure seemed especially slender and lithe. However, she was also extremely athletic in appearance. Her ivory skin was pleasantly contrasted against the olive skin of their boisterous pathfinder. What a sight to behold! From a purely aesthetic standpoint, of course. Seeing Changing Star like that reminded Sonny of the early days of their stay in the dream realm. Things had been much simpler back then. Suddenly wistful, he looked away and checked what Cassie was doing. The blind girl was resting near the fire, wrapped in her beautiful cloak. With her delicate features and small stature, she looked extremely lovely. And then there were Kai and Castor. Sonny sighed and looked down at his own scrawny body. Honestly, after all these months spent hunting monsters, eating meat and absorbing shadow fragments, he looked much better than he used to. In fact, by human standards, he was nothing short of, well, above average. Even as far as awakened went, he could probably compete with some in the looks department. But those two specimens were simply on another level. Kai was tall and shaped like a young god, with lean muscles rolling under his flawless skin, and a svelte figure that begged to be sculpted into a marble masterpiece. Sonny could swear that even sunlight was attracted to him, illuminating the charming archer in just a way to make him look as gorgeous as possible. Currently, Kai was tending to his arrows, somehow managing to make even that simple task look glamorous. Castor was much the same, with a perfect body and broad shoulders that simply screamed of power, appeal, and potency. With a darker skin to match his gallant and manly image, he was basically the epitome of masculinity. This was contrasted by a handsome but gentle face and humorous green eyes, creating a rather tempting visage. Sonny grimaced and turned away. You know what? To hell with this beach day nonsense. Let's do something productive. Walking over to Kai, Sonny cleared his throat and forced himself to not cover his eyes. The damn archer was just too dazzling. Him being shirtless in crowded places should have honestly been categorized as a public hazard back in the real world. If not, there was a gross oversight. I wonder how he was made. Probably in a secret government laboratory or a magic cauldron of some sort. I mean, there's no way that this dude is the same species as me, right? After a few seconds of Sunny blankly staring at him, Kai smiled politely. Sunny, did you want something?" Sunny flinched and covered his eyes. Don't smile at me." Kai blinked. "All right." Breathing heavily, Sunny glared at him and slowly lowered his hand. "That's better, and yes, I did want something." Kai suddenly livened up and pointed at his chest. "What is that, an accessory?" "What is he?" Lowering his gaze, Sunny noticed the mysterious key hanging on a thread tied around his neck. He didn't really want to show it to anyone, but with the puppeteer's shroud restoring itself in the Soul Sea, there were not a lot of places where he could hide it. None that he was willing to use, at least. Plus, no one else was supposed to be able to see the light of divinity, so to them, it just looked like a small iron key. Sunny frowned. "It's not an accessory, it's a key." Kai hesitated. "Oh, what does it open?" Sunny shrugged. "How should I know?" The charming archer seemed a little confused. "But if it's not an accessory and it doesn't open anything, why are you carrying it around?" His questions were starting to get tiresome. Sunny sighed. "To open something, of course." Kai scratched his nose. "But you just said that you don't know what it opens." Sunny gritted his teeth. "It's a damn key, right? So it has to open something. I just carry it around in case I find something that can be opened by that damned key. What's so hard to understand?" The beautiful archer gave him a strange look. "Oh, I see. That definitely makes sense." "Curses, that's not how I plan to approach him." Sunny instantly changed his expression and looked at Kai with a wide smile. The sudden shift looked sort of creepy. What I wanted to say, Knight, my dear friend, we are friends, right? Anyway, what I wanted to say was that I hope that this answer satisfies your curiosity. That's something a friend would say, right?" The charming young man gave him a dubious look. "I guess." Sunny made his smile wider, feeling his face hurt a little. "Great, so we are friends. Well, some might say that it's your lucky day, buddy, because today, and only today probably, Sunny's gorgeous emporium offers customers an exclusive friendship deal, just for friends of the establishment." "Aren't you lucky?" Kai suddenly coughed. "Wasn't it Sunny's brilliant emporium last time?" Sunny blinked. "Was it? Well, doesn't matter, the deal still stands. Are you interested or not?" The archer lingered for a few moments, and then cautiously said, "But Sunny, you still haven't told me what exactly that deal entails. Is it a deal for customers you consider friends, or are you trying to sell me your friendship? Or wait, do you want to buy mine? Or both? I'm confused." As if waiting for that response, Sunny nodded energetically. "Yes, I'm glad that you asked. In fact, I have an incredible item that I want to sell. It's so incredible that I am even reluctant to part with it. But since you are my friend, I am willing to give it away. Practically for free. Full friendship discount just for you. No need to thank me, really." Attracted by the noise, the others left what they were doing and were now staring at the two of them. Effie got distracted from preparing meat and was now observing the circus with an expectant grin. Realizing that he is now the center of attention, Kai sighed. "All right, I'll bite. What is that incredible item you want to sell me?" Sunny remained silent for a few moments, and then suddenly stopped smiling. "Oh, just something I had gathering dust in my soul sea. It's a memory that can serve as an endless supply of arrows, as long as you don't miss." The beautiful archer's eyes suddenly lit up. He glanced at his quiver and said, "Wait, really? You really have such a memory?" After thinking about it for a long time, Sunny had decided to give the blood arrow to Kai. Having the archer of their cohort armed with it would make a lot of things easier during this journey. He could potentially earn himself a bow in the future and learn how to use it, but it wouldn't be any time soon. Plus, with how dangerous the enchantments of the blood arrow were, nothing short of excellence would fly. and excellence took a lot of time to achieve, time that he didn't have. So giving it to a skilled archer like Kai was a better decision. Their recent encounters with the iron spiders only made Sunny more certain that this was the right thing to do. But he wasn't going to give it away for free. Yes, I do have such a memory. Then he casually added, "Oh, did I forget to say? It can provide an endless supply of arrows, and also all those arrows will be of the ascended rank." A grave silence settled over the marble arch. You're in possession of an ascended memory. That question was asked by Castor. Kai didn't have to ask, because he already knew that Sunny was telling the truth. His eyes slightly widened. On the Forgotten Shore, ascended memories were exceedingly rare, for an obvious reason. Sleepers could only get one by defeating a fallen nightmare creature, and there weren't a lot of people capable of such a feat. Added to that was the fact that not every kill provided a memory. In fact, most didn't. To receive one was the dream of every inhabitant of the Dark City. Sunny shrugged. "Oh, I have a couple, why?" The other being the onyx armor, which was broken and useless, but they didn't need to know that honestly. He grinned. "Only the best wares in the Sunny's astonishing emporium. Wait, was it astonishing? Ah, who cares? You get the sentiment." Castor shook his head. "How did you get an ascended memory, you?" The grin froze on Sunny's face. When he spoke a few moments later, all humor was gone from his voice, replaced by coldness. "Well, if you have to know, I got it by killing a fallen beast, before you ask. This time I didn't have to shake my finger or spit. I just looked at it and it died." Then he turned his head and looked straight at Castor. "I am very proficient in killing things, you know." In the end, Kai agreed to his deal. In exchange for the blood arrow, he gave Sunny the 2 weaker arrows he had. Sunny fed them to the stone saint, bringing her amount of shadow fragments to 29. That was 2 more than she had in the past, which meant that he received the same amount of fragments that he would have gotten by feeding her the blood arrow itself. He didn't really gain anything, but also didn't lose anything. Kai was the one who really profited from their exchange. So Sunny didn't lie when he said that it was an incredible deal. After breakfast, which transpired in somewhat awkward silence, Sunny sprawled on the ground and smiled happily. "You know, guys, these past few weeks made me realize something. Actually, it was all thanks to Kai who introduced me to Stev." Effie stretched, making Sunny stutter and lose the train of thought for a second, then smiled with satisfaction and glanced at him. "Really, and what is that?" Sunny hesitated for a few moments and said, "When I was a little kid, I loved reading webtoons about the Awakened. You know, the ones where they always explore ancient ruins, battle nightmare creatures, and grow more powerful with each victory." He chuckled. The hero and his cohort decide on an adventure, vanquish evil, gain mighty memories, then return to the real world and sell their spoils at the adventurer shop. They spend their money to upgrade their equipment and immediately set out on a more epic and dangerous adventure. Cassie smiled. "I love to read those too." Sunny glanced at her and sighed. "Yeah, but when I got older I couldn't help but think, what are they thinking about? Exploring ancient ruins is not a wise thing to do. In fact, only crazy people would do it. No matter how good you are, sooner or later, you will meet something more terrifying than any human can handle and die. If this was real life, why would all those adventurers go into the ruins over and over again?" The blind girl tilted her head and opened her mouth, but then closed it again. Sunny smiled. "But then it hit me. They were not doing it to vanquish evil. They were doing it to collect a wide variety of powerful memories. You see, the real dream is not to be the hero, one of their companions, or even the love interest. The real dream is to be the owner of the shop where the hero sells his trophies and buys new equipment. That way you can live a pretty life without risking your neck. That's the real goal. He crossed his arms and added, after a few short years of adventuring around the dream realm and collecting memories, you can retire, open a shop, and live comfortably for the rest of your life. All you need is to sell a memory once every couple of years. Maybe make some money off the younger, less fortunate adventurers, too. Kai laughed and looked at Sunny with curiosity. So, say that we somehow manage to return to the real world and become true awakened. Is this what you're going to do? Sunny thought about it for a few moments and shrugged. I don't know. I don't really have a lot to do in the real world, apart from compiling all the things I've learned about the Forgotten Shore into a report and giving it to a teacher who was kind to me back at the academy. So, maybe. I don't have enough memories yet to open a real store, though. He glanced at the charming Archer and smiled. What about you? What is the thing you really want to do if you return to the real world? Kai suddenly turned away, with a look of embarrassment on his face. Oh, I don't know. I haven't really thought about it. But after several seconds, he suddenly said in a shy voice, Avatar singer. Sunny blinked. What? The Archer hesitated for a while and then explained. Avatar Singer is a music competition show. Popular singers compete with each other, but the twist is that they are all using the stock VR avatars to perform, so the judges can only evaluate their voices and skill. They only learn the singer's identity after. Effie giggled. Why would you want to hide your pretty face, Knight? It's your best feature. Kai was silent for a few moments, and then smiled gently. I just think that it would be nice to be judged based on my skill and talent alone, with nothing else getting in the way. Also, that would be such a great way to announce my return to the fans. Just imagine they would be so excited. That would be a perfect media storm. Sunny shook his head. It seemed that Kai was really a celebrity, talking about things like fan reactions and media storms with a straight face. Did he even hear himself? But it was a nice dream, at least. Better than his own stupid desires by far. Turning to Effie, he asked, What about you? What would you do in the real world? The huntress grinned. I don't even have to think about it. I would go eat chicken wings, the real ones, and then start preparing myself for the second nightmare. Pretty simple. Everybody grew silent. After a while, Cassie said, Are you sure that you want to challenge another nightmare? Effie shrugged. I have my reasons, so yes, for me that is the only choice. The blind girl was quiet for a bit, and then said, I would go and spend time with my mom and dad. That's the thing I want to do most in the real world. Castor glanced at her, and Courtly nodded. I agree with Cassie. Family is the most important. When I come back, I will greet my father and look him in the eyes with pride, knowing that I did not let our clan down. Then, I will try to do everything in my power to grow as fast as possible, to relieve him of his worries and propel our bloodline to new heights. How very legacy-like of him. Finally turning to Nephi's, Sunny looked at her with a subtly dark expression and asked, How about you, Neph? What are you going to do when you return to the real world? Changing Star was silent for a while, looking into the distance with a calm expression. Then she sighed and answered in a quiet voice. I would go visit my mom, too. Everyone grew silent. Sunny blinked a little confused. Wait, your mom? I thought she was dead. Nephi's lingered for a bit, and then turned her face away. She is technically dead. What does she mean? Sunny glanced at the others and saw that they, too, were confused. Everyone except for Castor, that is, who seemed like he knew something. A few moments passed in tense silence, which was broken by Changing Star's sigh. Looking at them, she said evenly, My mother is one of the Hollow. She became hollow while pregnant with me, actually, so I never really met her, just her body. Nephi's grew silent. After a while, a strange smile appeared on her face. It's funny, really. When my grandmother was still alive, I made a point of treating that body as nothing but a corpse. But once she passed away and we were the only ones left, well, I found myself getting a bit confused. Nephi shrugged and turned away once again. Anyway, before leaving for the first nightmare, I used what little money there was left of our estate to buy her a VIP spot in a specialized hollow care facility. They are treating her really well, but still, I don't like the idea of her being alone there. So when I return, that's what I'm going to do, visit her. No one said anything, heavily affected by her words. Sunny stared at Changing Star, trying to imagine what it must have felt like, growing up in the company of your parents' soulless shell, with death staring at you through those empty eyes every day, always looming over you like a dark shadow, both of your past and your future. Maybe that was a part of the reason why Neff hated the spell so much. Sensing the heaviness in the air, Changing Star glanced at them and smiled darkly. "What, is this your first time meeting a Hollowborn? Well, I can't blame you. Creatures of my breed are pretty rare. In fact, even I have never met another one." Then she sighed and stretched her legs, moving them closer to the fire. "So yeah, that and dye my hair. These are the things I would do in the real world first." Sunny blinked. "Dye your hair?" Nephi's nodded. "How is that a priority?" Feeling that he was missing something, Sunny scratched his head and asked, "Why?" She glanced at him in surprise. "What do you mean, why? I'm not used to it and it's weird. Do I need another raisin?" He stared at her with a perplexed expression. Noticing it, Changing Star frowned and asked with a tiny hint of amusement in her voice, "Sunny, did you, perhaps, think that this is my natural hair color?" He was silent for a while, then opened his mouth and closed it again. "It's not." Nephi's looked at him for a while with a strange expression, and then suddenly exploded with laughter. Her laugh was melodic, pure, and very pleasant to the ear. With regret, Sunny realized that he had never heard it before. He wished that their lives were different so that people could hear Nephi's laugh more often. But they weren't, and would probably never be. After a while, she glanced at him and smiled. "Sunny, it's Silver for spell's sake, who has natural silver hair." Luckily, at that point, Kai suddenly came to his rescue. "Actually, I thought that it's natural too. Ah, it suits you very well, Lady Nephi's." Changing Star turned to him with an expression of utter surprise. Then, she glanced at Effie with a silent question. The huntress nodded. "Yeah, me too. I mean, who knows what you legacies are even made of?" Nephi's blinked a couple of times, then shook her head in bewilderment. "Well, no, it's not natural. It became like that after my first nightmare." Kai leaned forward with curiosity. "Really? What color was your hair before?" She shrugged. "Black, a normal human color." The charming archer stared at her and then smiled. "That would suit you very well too, Lady Nephi's. Ah, I can just see it." However, Sunny couldn't. The idea of Changing Star without her arresting, eye-catching silver hair simply could not fit into his head, let alone the fact that she was a brunette. How was this even possible? That would look so wrong, right? Well, as it turned out, life was full of surprises. Today, he learned not one, but two entirely new things about the person he had thought he knew the best in the world. Who would have guessed that this would happen? There might be something else except for skimpy swimsuits to these beach episodes, huh? After that, they spent some time resting and lazily conversing with each other. However, pretty soon, people started to get restless from boredom. To combat it somehow, Sunny suggested the idea of playing a sports game. His motives were not at all dictated by a secret desire to see a bunch of absolutely gorgeous young people jump around and wrestle with each while very lightly dressed. Nope, not one bit. However, things didn't go as he had envisioned them. Pretty soon, Sonny found himself cursing as he was desperately pulling on the golden rope in a furious match of tug-of-war. Well, it was supposed to be furious, but what was actually transpiring was Effie casually holding the rope with one hand while the four of them, Sonny, Cassie, Kai, and Castor, were trying to move her from the spot with no visible results whatsoever. After a while, the huntress simply pulled on the rope and sent their entire team to the ground. That's cheating. With a satisfied grin, Effie walked over and towered above him, her arms akimbo. Looking down directly at Sonny, she smirked. "Weak, when did you lose your spirit, shorty?" Then she winked and said in a mischievous tone, "Back at the cathedral, you were able to perform better, not to mention last longer." Sonny grew bright red and gritted his teeth. "Shut up, people will misunderstand." The huntress looked at him with a shocked expression. "Me's misunderstand? What are you, oh?" Then she pretended to be horrified and covered her mouth with one hand. "You, what kind of a degenerate are you? Training. I meant while you were training." While Sonny was staring at her in utter disbelief, his mouth wide open, Effie snorted, then turned away and exploded with laughter. Shaking her head, the boisterous huntress giggled one last time and walked away. No more sports games, ever. That wretched troublemaker will win them all anyway. He needed to teach himself how to come up with better ideas. With a bit of disappointment, Sonny realized that all types of physical activities were out of the question. Not only because Effie was going to win every damn game, but also because Cassie couldn't participate in most. If that was the case, they would have to settle for a battle of wit instead. After thinking for a while, he made a few preparations and addressed his companions in a mischievous tone. "All right, let's have another competition. This time, it will be a challenge for your minds." Sonny paused for a few moments and then smiled. "And to spice things up, this time there will be a prize. The winner will get this." With that, he produced the ascended soul shard that he had gotten from the corpse eater from behind his back and showed it to everyone. The beautiful crystal shined with an alluring, ethereal light. Except for Nephi's, who was resting with her eyes closed, everyone showed the shard a lot of interest. Sonny grinned. Of course, they were interested. It was very rare to see one of these, after all. He didn't really have a use for this thing right now, though, and making the cohort stronger would, in turn, increase his own chances of getting through the expedition alive. So parting with the shard was not that detrimental, especially if he could have some fun in return. Effie was the first one to speak. "What are the terms of the competition?" Sonny put the crystal away before answering. "It's really simple. I'll give you a riddle and the first person to answer correctly wins. How does that sound?" The huntress looked at him with doubt and shrugged. "Sounds boring, but all right, let's play." Smiling, Sonny commanded the shadow to separate from him and put the ordinary rock on it. Then he turned to Effie and said, "Listen carefully. Imagine, if you will, that the two of us, my shadow and I, are in possession of a rare treasure. One of us is an honorable, extremely attractive awakened that can tell no lie, while the other one is a vile, ugly, stupid devil that would never tell a word of truth. But you don't know which one is which." Effie grinned. "I mean, isn't it obvious?" Sonny blinked. "Shut up. Also, it's an imaginary situation. Okay? Anyway, you have to find out which one of us is hiding the treasure. If you do, you'll get the treasure. If you don't, the devil will kill you. You can only ask one question, either to me or the shadow. Understand?" The huntress giggled and flexed her muscles. "Can I just beat the answer out of you?" Sonny observed her vigorous figure for a moment too long, and then smiled. "You can, also you're dead." Effie stared at him in bewilderment. "What, why?" He shrugged and glanced in her direction with disdain. "Did I not tell you that you can only ask one question? Well, who told you to ask whether you can beat me up or not? What a stupid way to waste a question." While the unruly huntress was throwing daggers at him with her eyes, Sunny turned away and said, "Next." Kai smiled apologetically at Effie and approached him. "All right, Knight, what's your question? Do consider that our roles might have changed since the last round." The charming young man gestured at the marble beneath his feet and addressed the shadow. "What color is the stone I am pointing to?" Since Sunny had expected such a turn of events, the ordinary rock immediately answered in the deepest voice he could muster. "White." Kai looked at Sunny with a triumphant smile and said, "So I win. The shadow is obviously the honorable awakened." Sunny gave him a nod. "You indeed learned which one of us is a dirty liar. Surprise. It was me. However, that was not the task. The task was to find out which one of us is hiding the treasure, and you have already used up your only question. So, sorry, buddy, but you're also dead. I'll miss you very much, in this hypothetical situation." The charming archer sighed and looked at him with reproach. Sunny raised his eyebrows. "What? Why are you looking at me like this? Be grateful that I allowed you to play at all. With your flaw, you are like a walking cheat as far as this game is concerned." He scowled, then added, "In fact, the mere fact that you claim to have a flaw is an affront to us, truly flawed people." Kai lingered for a bit and walked to the side to sit near Effie. Sunny had to suppress his laugh when he noticed that the boisterous huntress reacted to being this close to the charming young man's deific body, pretty much exactly the same as he himself sometimes reacted to her. "Get your head out of the gutter, pure thoughts, Effie." A wide grin still found its way onto his face. Shaking his head, Sunny turned away to call the next contestant, but Kai suddenly spoke, interrupting him. "You're not entirely right, you know," he said gently. Sunny raised an eyebrow. "About what?" The archer looked down before answering. "About my flaw. Yes, it is not as heavy of a burden as many others have to carry, but it's still a curse." What is he talking about? It's almost entirely like a second aspect ability. Looking at Kai with a doubtful expression, Sunny asked, "Yeah, how exactly? Please explain, because I really can't think of a situation where this flaw of yours could be a burden." The beautiful young man was silent for a while, and then looked up at Sunny with a sad smile. "Imagine hearing the person who is the most important to you in the whole wide world telling you that they love you, only to realize that they don't. Imagine listening to your friend's words of encouragement, only to understand that he secretly wishes for you to crash and burn." He sighed. "Ignorance is bliss, Sunny. After returning from my first nightmare, I had to come to terms with the fact that most of the people in my life were not who I thought they were, and that what hid behind their smiles was ugly and vicious." Kai gestured to himself and said, "Because of who I am and how I am, there was always a whirlpool of people around me, but after learning their true faces, I couldn't, well, let's just say that if I had the choice, I would have preferred to stay blissfully blind to the truth forever." He grew quiet. "Damn." Suddenly Kai smiled. "But that's why I enjoy spending time with you so much, Sunny. No matter how bizarre the things you say are, they're always true. I never met anyone as stupidly honest as you. It's very refreshing." Sunny shifted uncomfortably. Did he just call me stupid?" Now he was kind of sorry for mocking the charming young man about his flaw. Perhaps it would be useful to someone like Sunny. But to a person like Kai, who always attracted the worst kind of attention from people, it could really be incredibly painful. The spell knew what it was doing. It always hit you in your most vulnerable spot. Damned spell, the being that weaved it must have been the worst kind of a sick bastard. Sure. One day Kai would inevitably learn that Sunny was not as honest of a person as he considered him to be. But until then, having the naive archer believe in this ridiculous notion was rather beneficial. Turning away with a bit of awkwardness, Sunny glanced at Castor and called, Next, the proud legacy was looking at Nightingale with a heavy expression. Hearing Sonny's voice, he lingered for a moment and then shook his head. It seemed that Castor did not want to play his game. Sonny was also suddenly painfully aware that between the six of them, 4 people had openly shared their flaws with the rest, be it out of necessity or because of trust. Only 2 had not. One of the 2 was Sonny, and the other one was Castor. Sonny knew why he was hiding his flaw from everyone, but what was the proud scion's reason? It sort of went against his whole honorable and dependable persona. With how devoted he acted toward Nephi's and the cohort, it was strange to see him keeping secrets. Was his reason the same as Sonny's, a dire vulnerability that the flaw would uncover? Or was there some other reason? Maybe he didn't trust the members of the cohort as much as he tried to make them think he did. And if so, why? With a shrug, Sonny left Castor alone. There was no point in lingering on these thoughts now. Until he had more information, any conclusion he could make would be useless anyway. Looking at Cassie, he smiled and said, "Hey Cass, wanna give it a try?" The blind girl hesitated for a bit, and then slowly approached him. While she was walking over, Sonny couldn't help but think back to a conversation he had with her in the distant past. Back then, Cassie had told him that knowledge could be the heaviest thing in the world. The burden of her flaw, while completely different from Kai's, was at the same time eerily similar. They both longed for the bliss of ignorance, but were doomed to always bear the crushing weight of unwanted knowledge. When Sonny thought about it, he found that all members of the cohort were connected with each other by invisible strings. Many things about them were like reflections, simultaneously the same, but also completely opposite. Like the fact that he could tell no lie, while Kai could not be lied to, or the fact that Nephi's was like sunlight, while he was made of shadows. Cassie could not see, while he had basically 2 pairs of eyes. Changing Star dreamed of destroying the nightmare spell, but Effie dreamed of making it her paradise. And so on. Were these the strings of fate? Or was he just making empty connections because that was what humans were prone to do? Come to think of it, only Castor didn't seem to be connected to any of them in any kind of a meaningful way. What was that all about? Cassie sat down near Sonny, pulling him out of his thoughts. He forced out a smile. "Ah, right, just like I said, the roles might have switched. So what is your question?" Cassie smiled and gestured to the shadow. "My question is, if I were to ask Sonny which one of you has the treasure, what would he say?" Sonny hesitated for a few moments, then gave the ordinary stone a mental command to speak one of the answers that he had whispered to it in advance. In the same comically deep voice, the shadow seemed to speak. "The shadow has it." Cassie nodded and turned to Sonny with subtle glee on her exquisite, doll-like face. "Sonny, you have the treasure, give." With that, she expectantly outstretched her hand. With a disappointed sigh, Sonny put the ascended soul shard in her palm and said in a listless voice, "Congratulations, you've won. Great job, yay." Cassie grasped the shard and giggled. Meanwhile, Effie leaned forward with a bewildered look. "What, that's it?" She stared at the blind girl in astonishment and then asked, "How the hell did you do it?" Cassie smiled and crushed the shard in her small fist, absorbing the soul essence. Then she shook her head and said, "It's simple, really. No matter who you ask about the other person's answer, their answer will always be the opposite of the correct one. That's because the awakened would have to tell the truth about the lie, while the devil would have to tell a lie about the truth. Do you understand?" Effie thought for a moment, then shook her head. "Nope. All the words you said seem to be familiar, but I don't understand crap. What do you even mean?" Cassie laughed. "Well, you should think about it in your free time. Or, just beat Sonny up the next time he decides to tease you with such riddles." With that, she went away, quite happy with herself. Sonny watched her go with his mouth wide open. Did she really just say that? Meanwhile, the perplexed huntress was staring at Sonny with a deep frown. Yeah, I might just do that the next time. He paled. What's up with that? This was an honest competition. Don't be a sore loser. Effie grinned menacingly. Sore? Let's see which one of yous will be sore when I'm done with you. What kind of soreness does she mean, I wonder? Wait, no. Why would I wonder about that? Standing up, Sonny glanced at Effie and scoffed. Who's going to be done with who? Don't flatter yourself, beanpole. With that, he walked away with contempt clearly written all over his face. His pace, however, was suspiciously hurried. A while later, the day was drawing to a close. Some of the memories had already restored themselves, so almost everyone was wearing their clothes and armors. Which, as far as Sonny was concerned, was a real shame. From a purely aesthetic point of view, of course. However, something else attracted his full attention. At the far end of the Marble Arch, Nephi's and Castor were standing facing each other, with sharp swords in their hands. They were about to clash, back when Nephi's was teaching Sonny how to use the sword. He had never been good enough to be her sparring partner. Once he learned enough to be of any use in a training fight, their fragile alliance had already broken and shattered to pieces. So, apart from that short altercation on the somber slopes of the Ashen Barrow, they had never actually crossed swords with each other. Now, it seemed, Changing Star had found a reliable sparring partner. Castor had not only replaced Sonny as her right-hand man, but also filled the roles that Sonny had been either reluctant or unfit to take on. Well, good for them. Once the memories of the cohort were close to being fully restored, Nephi's and Castor moved to the far end of the White Arch to practice. Now, they were standing opposite each other, ready to begin. Although no one called him over, Sonny approached the two legacies and sat down, ready to enjoy the spectacle. He was keenly interested in observing these two immensely skilled swordsmen in action. Both of them had been trained for combat from the day they could walk. Watching them would surely be helpful to his understanding of battle styles and techniques. Not to mention that he was very interested to see the rematch between Nephi's and Castor. The last time he saw them fight, Changing Star had lost, but not by much. She also had held back her aspect ability at that time, but he doubted that that would change today. Neph's flame could be used both to heal and annihilate, but sadly, not to train. Castor glanced at him and frowned with visible displeasure. Was he irritated because Sonny was about to learn a thing or two about his technique, or because Sonny was ruining his alone time with Nephi's? Either way, I don't care. What are you doing? Sonny shrugged. Watching? Why? Does this part of the arch belong to your clan or something? The proud legacy shook his head and turned away. Do as you wish. Neph glanced at Sonny and didn't say anything. However, he could tell that she didn't mind. In fact, it was almost as if she was approving of his decision. Without wasting any more time, the two of them clashed in a whirlwind of steel, moving with the kind of speed that made it difficult for Sonny to follow along. The clangor of swords filled the air. A bit stunned, he stared at the furious fight with a blank expression. Damn! After the months of hunting monsters in the Dark City and his lessons with the Stone Saint, Sonny thought that he had developed his skill a lot. And he did. It's just that compared to Nephi's and Castor, he was still so far behind that it was nothing short of disheartening. Before, he had sometimes entertained the thought of maybe being able to stand against them, well, at least one of them, on equal ground. But now, this illusion was ruthlessly broken. If things went south and he ended up on the opposite sides of the barricades with Castor, facing him would be tantamount to committing suicide. For now, at least. Which, of course, simply meant that instead of facing him, Sonny would have to stab him in the back. Duly noted. He wasn't going to take on an enemy of this caliber in a forthright manner anyway. What was he? A fool. Concentrating on the fight, Sonny watched attentively. With the benefit of his new experience, he was able to discern more and learn more from how these two experts moved and acted. Sometimes, he was even able to predict what they were going to do next. However, as time passed, a subtle frown appeared on his face. What is she doing? That doesn't make sense. Sonny had been able to notice two unexpected things from how Nephi's fought against Castor. The first one was rather easy to spot. While Castor did not use the full extent of his incredible speed, he did use a fair share of it, making it almost impossible for Nephi's to win any of their matches. She lost much more than she won, almost always by a few fractions of a second, which was seemingly not conducive to training at all. What was the point of training if one of the participants had almost no chance of winning because of how large the gap between them and their opponent was? There was a reason why Neph had never used Sonny as a sparring partner in the past, after all. But then, with a bit of amusement, he realized that Changing Star was doing exactly what he had done with the Stone Saint. She was tempering herself against an overwhelming force. That's why she had instructed Castor to use just enough of his aspect ability to always be much faster than her. Losing in a fight against a superior opponent was truly the best way to learn. So I was right in my approach after all. If Changing Star was doing the same, he had to be right. The second thing he had noticed, however, was much more perplexing. It was that Nephi's was not using her usual flowing and unpredictable battle style. Instead, she was moving with precise and firm elegance, hiding behind a carefully woven wall of defense and patiently waiting for an opening to appear instead of creating one herself. While intricate and impressive, this style was still a bit lacking in comparison to her real one. What's more, while it was deliberate and dependable, it was also rigid. If there was one thing that Nephi's would never tolerate in her battle art, it was rigidity. Her whole worldview was built around the idea that nothing had more value than adaptability. That's why the style she had taught Sonny suited her so well. It was designed to be the epitome of changeability. So the question was, why the hell she was using something so alien to her against Castor? The answer was pretty obvious. Either Nephi's was trying to experiment with something new in an effort to adopt elements of this style into her own, which didn't seem very likely. Or she didn't want Castor to know her true combat style too well, for some reason. But what could that reason be? Sonny rubbed his chin. Interesting, did Nephi's distrust Castor for some reason? Sonny surely did, and to be entirely honest, he didn't even need any reason to do so. His intuition and general paranoia were enough. But Changing Star was different. He had learned a bitter lesson and now knew that everything she ever did had a firm logic behind it, even if that logic was entirely different from that of a normal person. So if Nephi's was hiding her true battle style from Castor, there was a reason for it. But it didn't make any sense. From everything else that she had done, he was her most trusted lieutenant. Changing Star entrusted more to Castor than she ever had to anyone else. Castor himself also had never acted against Neph's interests. In fact, he was even a bit too loyal. The bastard was always near Nephi's, as though glued to her side. He also didn't seem to like it when others got too close to her. In that regard, he was almost like that flying rapier of Cassie's. During their entire day on the Marble Arch, the unfriendly Echo somehow always managed to remain between the blind girl and any men who tried to approach her for whatever reason. The message it was sending was quite clear. I'm watching you. It was honestly rather comical. Sonny shook his head. The dynamic of Changing Star's relationship with Castor was really weird. But once again, he didn't have enough information to make any conclusions. All he could do was keep his eyes open and try to sleep with one of them open when the handsome legacy was on watch duty. Maybe it was some strange legacy thing, like guarding the secrets of the clan against the prying eyes of other clans. Who knew? Glancing at the fighting swordsman, Sonny suddenly got an idea. After considering it for a bit, he looked at them again. This time, his eyes were burning. That actually might work. The problem with his technique at the moment was that it lacked true individuality. Sonny knew that there was a secret hiding inside his shadow that could become the foundation of his own unique battle style. He just couldn't understand what that secret was. His progress at deciphering it had stalled. While training, Sonny had trouble keeping his eyes both on the stone saint and on the shadow. Whenever he tried, the taciturn knight would inevitably send him into a sea of pain. But even if he managed it somehow, there was an invisible wall standing between him and anything even remotely resembling understanding. He was in a dire need of a breakthrough. So what if his shadows tried to imitate someone else instead of him? And not just someone, but a real sword expert in the middle of a fight. Not only would Sonny be able to observe every tiny detail of its movements, but there would also be something to compare them against. The shadow was a part of him, after all. It was hard to tell where Sonny ended and the shadow began. That's why the difference in how it moved and how he moved was almost imperceptible. But if it followed someone else, he would be able to separate the cadence and pattern of that person's movements from the shadows by contrasting it against his own. This had to work. Burning with anticipation, Sonny waited for Nephi's and Castor to take a short break, and then send the shadow over to the handsome legacy. Leisurely strolling over the white marble, the shadow approached Castor and brazenly glued itself to his feet. Then, it crossed its arms and glared at the legacy with almost palpable disdain. Castor stared at the shadow for a couple of seconds and then raised his head to look at Sonny. There was a very strange expression on his face. What are you doing?" His voice did not sound happy at all. Sonny shrugged with a carefree smile. "Oh, don't mind him. This cretin just lost me an ascended soul shard. As a form of punishment, I've decided to make him your shadow for a bit. So, just do your thing and don't worry about it." The shadow turned its head and pierced him with a menacing look. Sonny could practically hear its thoughts. "Who are you calling a cretin, you cretin?" "That had to be it. Did I guess right, huh? Oh, sorry, I forgot you cannot answer." Not paying the offended shadow any more attention, he just smiled wider. Castor frowned, hesitated for a few moments, and then said through gritted teeth, "I would prefer if you wouldn't." Sonny sighed. "Us all right, whatever." With that, he gave the shadow the command to leave the proud legacy alone. It separated itself from Castor, pretended to wipe its legs in disgust, and sauntered over to Nephi's, only to get attached to her feet with visible delight. It even bowed gallantly to her own shadow and made sure to not get in its way. What is this moron doing? Of course, Sonny had ordered the shadow to approach Neph himself, but he didn't expect it to be so visibly pleased by it. It was as if the shadow was simply beyond itself to finally follow someone competent. "You traitor!" Nephi's looked down on the shadow, smiled, and didn't say anything. "Well, good, now fight." The two legacies did not make him wait long. A few moments later, they were once again locked in a furious battle. Only this time, two shadows were following Nephi's. Both of them loyally imitated her movements, however. One of them was slightly, almost imperceptibly, different. Sonny looked at it with an intensity that threatened to burn two holes in the white marble. Soon his eyes widened. I see it, I think I see it." There, in the tiniest difference between the way Changing Star's own shadow moved and the way his shadow moved, he finally saw it. He had found his breakthrough, observing the motions of two shadows that followed Nephi's. Sunny was finally able to understand the foundation of the elusive shadow style. Before, he only sensed a hint of its essence. He knew that just like the shadow, the hidden battle art was insidious, shapeless, and ever-changing. But this was where lay the problem. A battle style was, by definition, a structured framework of patterns and principles, a doctrine that dictated how one should act to defeat an enemy. That doctrine was used as a foundation and expanded into a variety of specific movements to create a style. But if something didn't have a shape and its form was constantly changing, how could it ever be stable and structured? Sunny had no idea how the concepts he felt were at the core of the shadow style could create something even remotely applicable to practice. Insidious, shapeless, ever-changing. What was he supposed to do with that? But now he understood. The key to it all was so simple and evident that he almost laughed. Why had he not guessed earlier? It was so obvious. The idea that tied everything together was as innate to the nature of shadows as formlessness and elusiveness. It was imitation. After all, what were the first two things that came to mind when one thought about shadows? That they lived in the dark and imitated the things that hid them from light. The foundation of the shadow style was indeed insidious, shapeless, and ever-changing. Its core concept was to steal that which made the enemy strong and use it to destroy them. To master that style, he had to learn how to behave like a shadow. Sunny stared at Nephi's and Castor, but didn't see them. His mind was consumed completely by the sudden revelation. He had no time to pay attention to their fight anymore. This style had endless potential. If he managed to master it, he would be able to counter any style or technique used against him, not to mention become an immensely unpredictable opponent. What could be more unpredictable than a formless shadow? Of course, it was easier said than done. To begin with, while the ability to imitate the enemy was incredibly powerful, it also demanded an incredible amount of talent, experience, and insight from the user. You couldn't imitate that which you didn't understand after all. More importantly, this was just the foundation of the style. He still had to expand it into the actual collection of specific principles and retrain himself accordingly. That was a mammoth task. Creating a complete style from scratch could take a true battle master years, if not decades. Sunny had not even scratched the surface of this ambitious undertaking. However, this was all right. It was a start. Personal battle arts were not created in an instant anyway. It was a long and arduous process, with endless iterations coming and going while being tempered by the crucible of combat. It's not like the style would be useless until it became perfect. Sunny just had to get it to the point where it could be applied in battle in one form or another. That alone would tremendously enhance his technique. He smiled, congratulating himself. However, the next moment, a deep scowl appeared on his face. But how exactly am I supposed to do that? A while later, when the sun was already touching the western horizon, Sunny was sitting by himself and staring at his shadow. He was motionless like a statue and deep in thought. On his face, there was a troubled frown. When someone approached him, Sunny lingered for a few moments and then slowly looked up to see who was disturbing him. To his surprise, it was Nephi's. The leader of their cohort stood there for a bit, her graceful figure illuminated by the setting sun. Then, she sat down near him. Sunny blinked. Hey, Neph." Nephi's gave him a nod. "Hey, Sunny." He waited for a few moments and then asked, "Did you want something?" The corner of her mouth slightly curled upward. With a sigh, Changing Star glanced at him and said, "It's nothing much. I just wanted to say that I saw you fighting in the catacombs. You have improved a lot in these 3 months. Well done." Sunny smiled. That. Well, it's not like there's a lot of opportunities to lead a peaceful life in the Dark City. I was bound to improve a little, no." She shook her head. Don't sell yourself short. You really did well. Very few would have been able to grow so much and as fast as you, especially without a teacher." After hesitating for a while, Sunny shrugged. "You said it yourself. One real battle is worth more than 1,000 hours of training. There were a lot of battles in those 3 months." Nephis nodded and then asked, "That firm and grounded style you weaved into your technique, where did it come from?" He scratched the back of his head and, remembering the hellish training sessions with his pet monster, held back the urge to shiver. "I just observed how the stone saint fought and tried to replicate it." Changing Star smiled. "As I thought, I've seen her fight too. It's a very formidable echo, one of the finest I've ever seen." Coming from a legacy, this meant a lot. Sunny was indeed really lucky to be in the right place at the right time to get the echo of the Stone Saint. If the fallen siblings of the Iron Spiders had not brought her to the brink of death, he would never have been able to survive a battle with the living statue, let alone defeat her. He was even luckier to have a divine aspect that allowed him to turn echoes into creatures that were even more fearsome. All in all, Sunny was extremely fortunate. His fortune was exactly as incredible as his misfortune. He grinned. "You know my attributes. I do get lucky a lot." She lingered for a few moments and then said, "I'm glad that you were able to understand the true design of the battle style I taught you." So he was right on this point, too. The style Changing Star had given him was indeed designed to be as adaptable as possible and seamlessly incorporate elements of other styles. It was a perfect foundational battle art for those talented enough to make use of it, of course. Which were most likely extremely few and far between. Sunny glanced at Nephis and, after some deliberation, asked, "That style of yours is truly unique. Where did it come from?" He had been too inexperienced to realize this at the time, but what Neph had taught him could have been considered a rare treasure. The style he took for granted was, in fact, a work of pure genius. It deserved to be famous and ubiquitous. But it was not, which suggested that this treasure was a secret one. Changing Star lingered for a bit and then said, "It's a part of my inheritance." Sunny blinked and stared at her, stunned. Then why the hell did she teach it to me?" Sunny stared at Nephis with a complicated expression. After a while he asked, "Why did you entrust me with something so precious?" She glanced at him, lingered for a few moments, then shrugged. "We had a deal, remember? My knowledge in exchange for your share of the spoils we earn." There had indeed existed such a deal. However, he had not exactly acted in good faith when proposing it. After all, he had no use for those spoils in the first place. Sunny scowled. If Changing Star had really revealed a family secret to him because of a lie, she had a valid reason to be resentful of him. Just like he was of her. With a dark smile, he looked away and said, "You must have realized by now that I have cheated you in that deal." Nephis turned to him and said, her voice calm and even, "You mean the fact that you don't need to absorb soul shards to grow stronger?" Sunny froze for a moment, then gave her a nod. "You don't seem very surprised." Figures, when Sunny first learned about this ability of his, he was stunned. But Neph seemed to know a lot more than a normal person did. She didn't even try to pretend otherwise. It's a very rare aspect trait, but not unheard of among the upper echelons of the awakened. In fact, I am capable of something like that myself, although your case does seem to be especially unique. Sunny glanced at her. "How so?" Changing Star remained silent for a few moments and then said, her voice hinted with a bit of wonder. "Usually when an awakened absorbs the soul essence directly, the process leaves the remnants of the soul core empty. But when you do it, the shards are left brimming with it. This is very unusual." He shifted uncomfortably and then said, "Yeah, well, you have your share of secrets too, Neph. Don't think that I didn't notice. Lineage memories domains. Nephi's interrupted him with a heavy gaze. When Sunny fell silent and looked at her with a frown, she said in a strangely somber tone, "Never say those words aloud again, Sunny. I am serious. Just knowing them might get you killed." He stared at her for a long time and then scoffed. "No problem. Since you showed me the courtesy of not prying into my secrets, I won't pry into yours. I don't really want to know anyway. The mysterious upper echelons you mentioned can play their dirty little games all they want, as long as they leave me out of them." Then Sunny frowned and added, "But there is one question I have to ask you, because it involves me personally." She raised an eyebrow. "Sure, ask away." He grimaced. "Why are you hiding the true core of your technique from Castor?" Changing Star looked at him for a bit, and then smiled. "So you've noticed. That's good too. Yes, I've been using a different style when facing Castor." Sunny looked at her with a humorless expression. "Why?" She shrugged. "Why did you incorporate elements of the Stone Saint's technique into your own?" He shook his head. "To become stronger. Also, nice try at misdirection, but I won't fall for your tricks. I'm the one who taught them to you, remember, so just stop. Answer my question." Nephi sighed and turned away, glancing at the silhouette of the crimson spire that loomed in the distance. After a while, she said, "I'll answer you when we return to the Dark City. It won't change anything until then anyway. Your safety won't be compromised in any way." "What is that supposed to mean?" As he glared at her, Changing Star stood up and turned to leave. Before that, however, she lingered for a moment and said, "Keep sharpening your sword, Sunny. I expect big things from you." With that, she walked away, leaving him speechless. And what does she mean by that? After Nephi's left, Sunny returned to staring at his shadow. However, despite the fact that he had figured out the essence and foundation of the elusive battle art that hid inside it, he had no idea how to go about creating an actual style out of them. He did not have enough experience and mastery to be able to create something out of nothing. It was a dead end. Curses, why even hide that damn mystery inside the aspect if I can't do anything with it? Perhaps in the distant future he would be able to. But right now, it was as though he had found the door, but was not strong enough to turn the key and unlock it. It just stood there and teased him endlessly, just like the damn gateway inside the Crimson Spire. It was pure torture. Maybe I wasn't supposed to notice the existence of the hidden style so soon. But he did, and he worked so hard to gain insight into its secrets. Was it all for nothing? All the pain, all the effort? Why would spell do this to him? Do you have to ask? That's the damn spell we're talking about. Why wouldn't it do something like this to you? With a bitter sigh, Sunny turned away and tried to forget all about the shadow, techniques, and battle styles. It was almost dark anyway. Time to sleep. Walking over to the center of the marble arch, Sunny lay down beside the other members of the cohort and tiredly closed his eyes. The beach vacation was over. It was funny, visually stunning, and unexpectedly emotional, but ended on a bitter note. Tomorrow was going to be another long day. To hell with this. Exhausted by all of it, he fell asleep before even finishing the thought. In this crap. Sunny opened his eyes and looked around in confusion. The world was enveloped in a strange, dim twilight. Deep shadows surrounded him, shrouding the tall walls that were cut from black marble. Looking between the mighty columns, Sunny saw the black circle of the sun burning in the lightless sky. An eclipse. No, wait, what walls? What columns? Wasn't he supposed to be sleeping at the top of the white arch? What was happening? Suddenly, a woman screamed toward the silence like a sharp knife. It was full of pain and suffering. Sunny tried to summon the midnight shard into his hand, only to realize that he had no hands. Then something else resounded from the darkness. A baby's cry. What the? Almost at the same time, Sonny realized something terrible. This was a dream. He was dreaming. People were not supposed to dream in the dream realm. Not good. When Sonny realized that he was dreaming, the first thing that came to his mind was that there was another soul tree growing somewhere near the White Arch. However, after a few moments of panic, he quickly dismissed this idea. After all, he had never actually dreamt while under the mind hex of the ancient fiend. He had just mistaken the broken memories of his conversation with Cassie for a dream. But this one was real. The dreamscape that surrounded Sonny was ephemeral, shifting, and shrouded in shadows. Above him, the sun was like a circle of darkness, with crimson light drowning in a burning sea of clouds. However, none of that light reached him. In the tenebrous hall of black marble, there was nothing but empty silence, which was now destroyed by the sound of a baby crying, of course. The woman's screams had long grown silent. Peering into the Stygian depths of the dark marble hall, Sonny saw nothing but endless shadows. The baby's cries were coming from somewhere beyond them, or from within them. A subtle thought entered Sonny's mind. The monumental walls, the colossal columns, the grandiose hall, all of it looked strangely familiar, as though he had already been here once, a long time ago. All that was missing were the signs of desolation, and a large altar cut from a single block of black marble. In fact, it should have been standing right where the crying sounds were coming from. Familiar words appeared in his mind, now full of new meaning. Child of shadows. In the next moment, everything disappeared. The world was swaying. A seemingly endless surface of black stone was flowing past his vision, moving up and down. No, it wasn't the stone, but Sonny himself. He was the one swaying. What? In fact, Sonny found himself in the body of a toddler. He was currently held gently by a young woman who was walking down a long stone corridor, which was dimly lit by burning torches. Hence, the swaying. The girl was very young, not older than Sonny himself, his actual body, that is. She was slender and exquisitely beautiful, with soft porcelain skin and long raven hair. The lissom beauty was dressed in a flowing silk tunic that left her delicate neck and shoulders exposed. A black serpent was coiled around her arms and neck, its scales so intricately tattooed that sometimes it seemed as though the creature was moving. Whoever marked the girl's skin with this image was a true genius of their craft. Sonny had never seen anything like it in the real world. However, he had seen similar markings in a nightmare. This was the mark of a slave who belonged to the shadow god. The young girl was a temple slave, just like he had been in his first nightmare. The serpent coiled around her neck, and arms served both as her collar and her shackles. She was also the toddler's mother. Sonny could tell from the love with which she held the child and the quiet smile that appeared on her face every time she looked at him. Sonny might have lost his own mother at a young age, but he still remembered that much at least. If the mother is a slave, then the child is too. Finally, Sonny began to understand what was happening to him. The dream he found himself in did not belong to him. Instead, it belonged to the nameless temple slave whose role he had assumed during the first nightmare. The original child of shadows. This vision was his memory. Soon, the young girl entered a vast hall that was shrouded in darkness. Judging by the black marble walls, they were in another part of the ancient temple. Sonny couldn't see much of his surroundings, but he could somehow tell that they were underground. In the center of the hall, 7 tall braziers were burning with strange, pale flames. On the edges of light, motionless, stood a dozen or so people. Sonny shivered, suddenly reminded of the silent shadows populating his soul sea. However, these were not ghosts but humans. There were several other slaves, while the rest appeared to be priests. To tell the truth, there was not a lot of difference between them. It seemed as though the servants of the shadow god did not pursue opulence and status. In fact, many of the priests bore the same markings as the slaves, suggesting that they themselves had belonged to the temple once. What are they doing here? What is happening? Approaching one of the elder slaves, the young beauty entrusted the child to her. Separated from the warmth of his mother's chest, the toddler, Sonny, felt cold and scared. However, the older woman consoled him with gentle words, preventing the child from crying. Then she moved back to stand with the rest of the people gathered in the underground hall. Their faces were calm and solemn. The young woman, meanwhile, slowly walked into the circle of light. Her movements were elegant, flowing, and graceful. Stopping at the very center, she stood motionlessly between the 7 pale flames, surrounded by 7 shadows. Sonny stared at the beautiful slave, feeling that something important was about to happen. But what? As he became pensive and uneasy, a sudden sound broke the silence. It was the deep and reverberating ringing of a zither. As the musical instrument sang, the slave girl suddenly moved. As she did, her 7 shadows moved with her. This is. With his eyes wide open, Sonny watched the young woman. She was dancing. The beautiful slave danced in the circle of light surrounded by impenetrable darkness, her every move full of indescribable grace and clear, but elusive purpose. Her young body was flexible and lithe, but also strong and trained as much as a warrior's. Her skill as a dancer was like that of a battle master. It was mesmerizing. The young woman weaved a beautiful pattern with her movements, their cadence and nature simultaneously firm and flowing, sharp and gentle, clear and unpredictable. She danced alone but also with 7 partners, effortlessly controlling both her own body and the 7 shadows cast by it. At times, it was hard to tell which one of them was real. Her dance was insidious, shapeless, and ever-changing. Sonny froze. He recognized these movements. They were the same as how his shadow moved. This was the source and origin of the battle style he wanted to create. This was shadow dance. Sonny opened his eyes. The grand arch of white marble was exactly the same as when he had last seen it. The sun was already climbing the gray dome of the sky, chasing the remnants of the dark sea away. The rest of the cohort had woken up some time ago and were now preparing for the journey ahead. He had overslept. However, it didn't matter. With eyes burning with excitement, Sonny sat up and recalled everything that he had witnessed in his dream. The memories were still there, clear as day. He could recall every movement, every step, every breath of the dance that the beautiful slave had performed. The nameless slave's mother. His eyes dimmed slightly. That dream of his, while a precious gift, was also a source of numerous questions. Now that he was awake, Sonny was able to see a few things with more clarity. The scene that he had witnessed at the very beginning of it was that of the nameless slaves, the original child of Shadow's birth. He was born during a solar eclipse, not unlike Sonny. That fact put a lot of things into perspective. Everyone knew that the spell did not choose the role an aspirant would play during their first nightmare randomly. That was apparent from the fact that the bodies they inhabited in it, while different, were very close to their real ones. However, the actual principle of how the spell chose these roles and the events of the nightmares were largely unclear. But now, Sonny knew that he shared more than simply outer appearance with the temple slave, whose body he inhabited for a few short days. Both of them were born in similar, extremely rare circumstances. Both of them were at the very bottom of society, oppressed and unwanted, surviving against all odds instead of because of them. Both of them were left without a family at a young age. The tough life in the outskirts took Sonny's parents and sister away. To the nameless slave, it was the servants of the mighty war god that destroyed his childhood home and life. Sonny didn't know what happened to the beautiful dancer after the last temple of shadows was destroyed by them. but he doubted that it was anything good. With a heavy sigh, he looked down. Fate, it was fate. What he shared with the temple slave was a similarity of fate. Sunny was growing more and more convinced that the spell was connected to the strings of fate in some way. Perhaps it was weaved from them. Remembering the void he had found himself in after completing his first trial, Sunny looked into the distance with wonder. That void was filled with a myriad of stars that served as nexuses for an inconceivably complex net made of countless strings of silver light. Were those the strings of fate? He shook his head. Whatever they were and whatever the spell was, it was not something he could know or understand yet. Numerous people, most of them better informed and smarter than him, had tried and failed. It was wiser to concentrate on something within his reach. The shadow dance. Sunny smiled. He wasn't so engrossed by the dancing of the beautiful slave girl because it was truly stunning and enchanting. He was riveted beyond belief by it because he recognized the pattern of the battle style hiding in his shadow and her graceful movements. Turns out it wasn't a battle art at all. It was a dance. But was there a difference? Not in this case, not really. It wasn't a coincidence that people often described the way true masters of battle fought as dancing. At their core, fighting and dance were very close. That's why combat, when brought to a truly impressive level, was like a dance. So why couldn't a dance, when mastered to perfection, be like a battle art? Sunny was certain that he was right. He had already comprehended the essence of shadow dance and gained insight into its foundation. With the memory of the beautiful dancer moving as one with her 7 shadows, he now had the last piece of the puzzle, the actual set of moves and principles that he could use to create an actual battle style in their image. He didn't have the battle art yet, but he did now possess all the components needed to create it. Of course, it was not going to be easy. Even with all that knowledge stored in his mind, he would still have to spend a lot of time and effort and spill a lot of blood, both his own and that of his enemies, to turn the graceful dance of the beautiful slave girl into a deadly dance of steel. It wasn't even certain that he would succeed. But Sunny would be damned if he wasn't going to try. Shadow dance would become his personal battle art. He was going to make it happen. As if echoing his last thought, the familiar voice of the spell suddenly whispered into his ear. When Sunny heard what it said, his eyes widened. "You have received an aspect legacy, Shadow Dance." Sunny stared into the emptiness, stunned to his core by what the spell had just whispered. Aspect legacy, did it really just say those words? He gulped. Aspect legacy was something that every aspect contained, but very few awakened ever received. Unlike the boon of the first nightmare, and every nightmare after that, as well as the reward sleepers received after returning from the dream realm for the first time, each aspect legacy had a unique set of requirements that the owner of the aspect had to meet to unlock it. When they did, they were rewarded with a powerful relic. Usually, it was a memory that synergized perfectly with their aspect abilities, or sometimes even an echo. Legacy clans weren't called that accidentally. While not every clan possessed an aspect legacy, most of them did. In fact, it was the acquisition of the aspect legacy that laid the foundation for the creation of many of these clans. By now, some of the most powerful clans even had several. But getting an aspect legacy was not an easy feat. Most of them were received by saints, followed by master, and only a few were won by mere awakened. Getting the aspect legacy while still being a sleeper, that was simply unheard of. Just like getting a true name during the first nightmare, I guess. Sunny couldn't believe his luck. Of course, he worked bitterly hard to be able to grasp it, and yet the magnitude of the harvest he reaped was utterly unbelievable. However, why was his aspect legacy not a memory, but a battle art? That was really strange. Not wasting any time, Sunny summoned the runes and hungrily searched for new ones. What he saw made him tremble, right there in the glimmering field of familiar runes, in the cluster describing his aspect. A new string of them appeared. Aspect Shadow Slave. Aspect Rank Divine. Aspect Abilities Shadow Control. Aspect Legacy Shadow Dance. As soon as Sunny concentrated on the aspect legacy, new runes shined to describe it. Shadow Dance Description. Once an elegant dance, now a deadly battle art. This mysterious style was created by the treacherous Lost from Light after witnessing a graceful slave dancing with her shadows. Who else could have taken something so beautiful and turned it into something so vile? Sunny coughed, trying hard not to think too much about the manner in which the spell had described him. Again with this treacherous stuff. I'm not that treacherous, okay? So what if I lie, manipulate, and backstab people all the time? That's just being smart. However, what grabbed his attention was not the description itself, but what glimmered beneath it. Shadow Dance Mastery Level 0/7. First Relic Unearned. Second Relic Unearned. Third Relic. There were a total of 7 lines of runes, each promising him a legacy relic once he achieved the corresponding level of mastery with his newly envisioned battle style. 7 of them. Not 1, not even 2 or 3, but 7. Whole legacy clans were created around a single legacy relic. Sunny couldn't even imagine what he would be able to do with 7. Start a family and turn it into the most powerful clan in the world. No, that would mean putting all his eggs into one basket. Better create several clans. Right? Why start a family when you can start 7? Wait, no, that didn't sound right. Right. Consumed by avarice, Sunny looked at the rising sun with an excited grin. This was great. This was incredible. However, his excitement was short-lived. Yeah, right. I would have to get back to the real world first, and that's not going to happen. Turning his head slightly, he stared at the distant silhouette of the Crimson Spire and lost himself in thought. A while later, Effie's voice brought him back to reality. Hey, doofus, breakfast is ready, while spacing out and smiling like an idiot. Sunny answered without thinking. Just thinking about creating a legacy clan. Have you ever thought about creating a clan, huh, Effie? The robust huntress stared at him for a few seconds with a strange expression, and then grinned. Is that an invitation? Still lost in thought, Sunny tilted his head and glanced at her astutely. Huh, not bad, not bad. The choice of a partner has to be of utmost importance when starting a legacy clan. Take Effie, for example. She is a very fearsome awakened. Her aspect is extravagant and powerful beyond belief. Plus, her physique is nothing short of divine. Any heir she gives birth to is bound to be both strong and gorgeous. A very suitable candidate, I guess. Huh, what? No, not an invitation, just considering different options. At that moment, Sunny suddenly realized that he had been unceremoniously ogling Effie up and down for a better half of a minute, and that her grin had long turned dangerous at some point. The huntress stretched her neck and said lazily, I see, so you have chosen death. He blinked. No, wait, I didn't mean it like that. I was just, theorizing. The unruly huntress cracked her knuckles and smiled menacingly. Oh, so you were theorizing about me, huh? Do tell, do tell. No, no, wait, stop, stow. Surprisingly, Sunny survived. Barely. Soon after that, they left the grandiose marble arch and continued their journey into the depths of the labyrinth. Before the expedition started, Nephi's had told him that they had a fast and comparatively safe way to reach the southern edges of the Forgotten Shore. As much as anything could be safe in this cursed place. Without it, getting to their destination would have taken them months. Now that they had left the Dark City, Sunny finally decided to satisfy his curiosity and asked what that mysterious method of traveling with incredible speed was. When he heard the answer, He just stared blankly at Changing Star for a few minutes, trying to guess if she was kidding or not. She wasn't. In the end, he didn't even ask any questions and just waved his hand dejectedly. There was no point. If Nephis had come to know of this secret from Cassie's visions and believed that it was doable, then he did not have to worry. Too much. It's not like he could turn back now anyway. Plus, the expedition had shown itself to be extremely lucrative for him so far. Mere days after its start, he had already gotten plenty of shadow fragments and an ascended memory, not to mention making a breakthrough in his exploration of battle styles and earning an aspect legacy for his effort. In any case, they had to travel about a week's worth of time south to get the chance to access that fast method of travel. The heights they were going to use on the way as shelters during the nights, they were planned in advance with the help of the Forgotten Shore map Nephis had created. To make sure that these shelters were really where the map showed and remove any possibility of ending up stranded in the middle of the labyrinth with no way to escape the dark sea, she had even employed Kai during the week that Sunny had spent with Effie. The charming archer scouted the way ahead and confirmed that her map was correct. Now, the only danger they really faced from the Forgotten Shore itself was that of a sudden storm. However, with a true oracle in the ranks of the cohort, this danger was dramatically diminished. Now that Cassie had grown into her powers and absorbed a lot of soul essence, she was often able to warn them in advance if something like that was going to happen. There were also the usual perils of the labyrinth, of course. And as they went deeper into its deadly maze, the situation slowly began to turn from bad to worse. As they ventured deeper into the southern reaches of the Crimson Labyrinth, the situation slowly turned worse and worse. The iron spiders that had been not too threatening to the cohort of powerful, experienced Dark City hunters at the start of it all were growing more and more deadly with each step of the way. Their numbers grew exponentially, becoming a real danger pretty soon. More and more often bigger and stronger monsters appeared at the head of the attacking beasts, bringing with them all sorts of problems. What's worse, the spiderweb they used to trap their prey was changing, too. The metal wires from which it was weaved became so thin that it was at times almost impossible to notice it, and sharp enough to cut through armor and bone, while maintaining the resilience of superb steel. The whole labyrinth was covered in it, turning from crimson to dull gray. The cohort bled much more because of the invisible webs than they did because of the spiders themselves. Of course, the iron spiders were cunning creatures, too. More often than not, they only attacked once one of the humans was caught in their nets, leading to a few really harrowing experiences for the members of Changing Star's party. And there was a wide variety of other terrifying creatures waiting to ambush them in the twisting pathways of the Crimson Coral, too. What made them so dangerous was that the cohort didn't know anything about their anatomy and abilities. Every fight was a gamble, often resulting in one or several of them sustaining serious wounds. There were three things that made the situation somewhat bearable. The first one was Nephis and her healing flames. Although using the aspect ability took a toll on their leader, it was often worth it, especially if one of the members of the cohort received wounds that limited their mobility. One thing was far more dangerous than any nightmare creature that lived in the labyrinth, and it was not reaching safety before the torrent of black water flooded the Forgotten Shore, bringing inconceivable horrors with it. Thanks to Neph, they didn't have to worry about anyone slowing the cohort down. The second reason, unexpectedly, was the iron spiders themselves. Because of the peculiar way they hunted, a lot of creatures found their deaths in the cutting embrace of the wire spiderwebs. Finding these eviscerated corpses or cocoons containing old carcasses became a common occurrence once the party invaded the depths of the spider territory. Thanks to that, 6 humans were able to study and anticipate many of the monsters they had to face in this region of the labyrinth. A lot of potentially deadly surprises had been avoided due to the cohort stumbling onto a corpse of a similar creature prior to fighting against a living one, and spending some time to learn about its strengths and weaknesses. The third reason was the blood arrow. In the hands of an experienced archer, it was almost as deadly as it would have been in the hands of an inexperienced one, the difference being that the latter would mostly be a danger to themselves, quickly turning into a bloodless husk. The first time Kai had used it, Sunny experienced a disturbing feeling of shock. That time, they were facing a large group of iron spiders led by a much larger arachnid, the awakened monster of their tribe, similar in status to a carapace centurion. These creatures were much heavier and more powerful, with thick plates of iron armor covering their bodies almost completely. Even Castor's enchanted sword had trouble cutting through their defenses. What's worse, due to the speed with which the wretched abominations moved, it was especially hard to catch them in a gap between the armor plates. Sunny was facing two smaller iron spiders at once while the stone saint was butchering the third one. With his shadow observing what was happening behind his back, he didn't miss the moment when the cunning awakened monster suddenly disengaged from Nephi's and dashed into his direction, its mandibles moving in anticipation of tasting human flesh. Calmly preparing to dodge, Sunny tensed his muscles and narrowed his eyes. Whistling over his shoulder, a menacing black arrow suddenly streaked through the air. Its shaft was made out of dark polished wood, with black feathers for fletching and a vicious white arrowhead that seemed to be cut from pale white bone, like a sharp fang of some terrible creature. The arrow easily pierced the thick iron plate protecting the spider and tore deep into his body. Even though Kai messed up his shot a bit and hit the monster in its abdomen instead of the head, the results were nothing short of harrowing. In the next moment, the awakened monster suddenly slowed down and staggered. Then, it tried to lunge forward once again, but ended up losing its balance and weakly falling to the ground. Its limbs moved slightly, quickly losing any form of cohesion. Their movements grew slower and slower and then stopped. Beneath the iron plates, the spider's body grew taut and shriveled like that of a mummy. Soon, it seemed completely drained. Sunny blinked, shaken by this disturbing image, and couldn't help but glance briefly at his forearm. If not for the blood weave, he might have ended up as a shriveled corpse, too. He would have gone through with cutting off his arm and survived, most likely, but if he had been a couple of seconds too late, better not to think about. Anyway, he was glad that the blood arrow was on their side now. Not too far away from him, gliding through the air, Kai suddenly made a strange gasping sound. Sunny didn't know what it felt like to have your blood magically drained and then suddenly return to your body, but he doubted that it was pleasant. Also, there was this question. If Kai's blood was used to create the arrow and then returned to him, if he had hit his mark, of course, then, where did the blood drained from the prey go? He wasn't sure that he wanted to know. In any case, with Nightingale in possession of the morbid ascended memory, their battles with iron spiders and other inhabitants of the labyrinth became a bit less perilous. The blood arrow did not have any enchantments that needed to be activated by manipulating soul essence, so the charming archer could use it to its full potential. Although Sunny was still a bit bitter about having to give such a menacing weapon away, he was now more confident than ever that his decision was the right one. Just like that, 6 more days passed by. During this time, he didn't gain any new memories, but managed to accumulate 18 more shadow fragments, bringing his total to 340. He was still not as strong physically as he had been before creating the Shadow Saint, but getting closer and closer. In the evening of the 6th day, bloodied and exhausted, the cohort had finally approached the goal of the first leg of their expedition. Looking at it, Sunny couldn't help but stop in his tracks. His eyes slightly widened. Of course, thanks for watching. Please subscribe and like the video and comment down if anything wrong in the story, and if have any suggestion to a new novel, or want next part of any series, comment down. Our target is to get 1K subscriber. There will be surprise for all of you. Stay tuned.
Hello.